You think sharing your struggles makes you authentic. But what if it's the very thing keeping you trapped? You believe people will understand you if you just explain yourself better. But what if explaining is the chain that binds you? You think talking about change is progress. But what if it's the silent killer of your discipline? We live in a world that worships noise. Social media feeds thrive on endless updates. New goals, personal dramas, half-finished projects, public declarations of private lives. And yet, the more people talk, the less they change. Oversharing has become a kind of modern epidemic. It masquerades as openness, but in reality it drains energy, leaks confidence, and hands your destiny over to the opinions of others. The ancient Stoics saw this long before Instagram or TikTok existed. To them, words weren't harmless. They were currents shaping the direction of a life. Every careless sentence was like tossing pebbles into a river small at first, but with enough repetition, it changed the entire flow. Seneca warned against endless talk, reminding us that true progress isn't announced. It's lived. Marcus Aurelius, who could have filled Rome with speeches, instead kept a private journal of quiet reflections. Epictetus told his students to let their philosophy show more in actions than in words. These weren't just catchy slogans, they were strategies for survival in noisy times. And if noisy times were a problem then, what about now? Today, many of us confuse speaking with living. We talk about quitting toxic relationships but stay. We promise ourselves to hit the gym but settle back into the couch. We tell our friends, I'm finally starting that side hustle, but the notebook remains blank. Talking becomes a performance, a substitute for progress. It feels like forward motion, but it's really the treadmill of stagnation. That's why this conversation matters. Because every time you narrate your pain, complain about your failures, or broadcast your half-born plans, you're not just wasting breath, you're reinforcing the very chains that hold you. The harsh truth, what you constantly say out loud becomes your identity, and your identity becomes your destiny. But here's the twist. Silence isn't repression. It isn't weakness. It isn't pretending everything's fine. Silence, practiced with intention, is strength. It's focus. It's the invisible shield that protects your energy while you build, while you grow, while you transform. The person who learns to hold their tongue learns to hold their life together. The one who stops feeding the world with explanations starts feeding their own destiny. This is where Stoicism becomes radical for our age. It tells us that the way out of the trap of oversharing isn't to hide in bitterness, but to reclaim silence as strategy. Instead of narrating every wound, you start writing your future with action. Instead of waiting for applause, you practice in the shadows until your life speaks louder than any words could. Over the next lessons, we're going to explore 12 timeless Stoic principles designed to help you stop leaking your strength through endless talk and start living with clarity, confidence, and quiet power. You will discover how less talk leads to more destiny, how your inner voice shapes the direction of your life, how rewriting your private narrative can shift everything you believe about yourself, and how protecting your trust, practicing silence, and valuing actions over words will free you from the prison of explanation along the way. We'll confront modern traps, the culture of constant updates, the addiction to validation, the fear of being misunderstood. We'll draw from psychology, history, and real-life stories to show how silence, prudence, and self-discipline aren't relics of the past, but urgent tools for today's challenges. And let me be clear, this isn't about becoming a monk or living isolated from the world. It's about learning discernment, about choosing carefully what you share, who you share it with, and when. It's about realizing that not every thought deserves to escape your lips, not every plan needs an audience, and not every struggle requires a witness. Because the truth is, your greatest growth will happen in silence, not under the spotlight. If you've ever felt drained by explaining yourself, If you've ever regretted trusting the wrong person, if you've ever noticed how easily promises fade while actions endure, then these lessons are for you. They're here to challenge you, to strip away illusions, and to offer you something far more solid than applause, the strength of a destiny shaped in silence. Welcome to StoicCraft, a place where we take the wisdom of the Stoics and apply it to the pressures of modern life, where we stop talking about change and start living it. If what you hear resonates, consider subscribing, not because we need numbers, but because every voice of commitment strengthens this community of people determined to live with clarity and courage. And before we move into the first lesson, I want to leave you with a challenge. In the comments, write this phrase, Stoic at heart. From today on, my silence builds my strength. That single sentence will be your first act of alignment, a declaration not for the crowd, but for yourself. A reminder that from this day forward, you are no longer narrating your struggles. You are writing your destiny. Many of us live in the habit of promising ourselves change with our mouths, but never delivering it with our hands. We say things like, tomorrow, I'll start waking up early. All this time I'm quitting social media for good. Or I'm finally going to launch that project I've been dreaming about. And yet, when we look back, nothing has changed. The only thing we managed to pile up was excuses. Talking is free, acting costs, and that price is what most people avoid. The truth is, your mind hears every word you speak, even the ones you throw out casually. And when you consistently break those promises, you are not just letting others down. You are letting yourself down. Over time, you erode the sharp edge of your own credibility. Your words lose power, and with them, your confidence shrinks. You become someone who sounds impressive but doesn't move. It's like draining a battery every time you talk too much about what you're going to do. You spend all your energy explaining, narrating, and justifying, and by the time you're done talking, there's no energy left to actually act. The result is lots of noise and zero movement. The Stoics had no patience for the solution. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every day to do each act of his life as if it were his last. He didn't say promise it. He said do it. Epictetus told his students that it is not words that elevate the person, but actions. Speeches are carried away by the wind, but actions are carved into stone. They understood something that modern psychology has only recently confirmed. When you talk about your goals publicly, your brain releases the same dopamine you'd get from achieving them. You trick yourself into feeling satisfied. And because you already felt rewarded, you lose the hunger to continue. This is why announcing your goals on social media is such a trap. People post their resolutions with hashtags like Nuyonum and feel good when likes and comments roll in. But the applause replaces the discipline. The hunger to act fades because the validation feels like achievement. Look round and you'll see it everywhere. People tell their friends about their big plans to quit toxic relationships but stay right where they are. They announce they're building a business but never make it past the brainstorming stage. They promise themselves fitness but stop at the selfie outside the gym. We live in an era where announcing has become more important than doing. It's no wonder so many feel stuck. Every unfulfilled declaration makes you trust yourself less. You stop believing in your own words. Slowly, you build an identity not of transformation but of empty promises. And once you stop trusting yourself, momentum dies. But silence changes everything. Silence keeps your strength intact because you're no longer spending it on explanations. Think of Harper Lee, who published To Kill a Mockingbird, one of the most important novels of the 20th century. The world expected her to produce more, to explain more, to keep talking. But she chose silence. For decades, she published nothing else. Critics called it strange. But that silence gave her single work immortal weight. She left a legacy that no endless interviews or speeches could have created. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was power. The same applies to you. You don't need to tell anyone you're going to the gym. Just go. You don't need to post online that you're deleting apps. Just delete them. You don't need to explain to friends why you're suddenly more reserved, why you're spending nights reading instead of drinking, why you're practicing calm instead of exploding in anger. Your evolution is not a product for sale. It doesn't need a marketing campaign. Every time you share your plans before living them, you expose them to judgment. You take on the weight of other people's expectations, and that weakens you. It's like planting a seed and digging it up every day to prove that it's real. A seed doesn't shout that it will be a tree. It grows quietly, in darkness, protected. And then one day it's strong enough to give shade. Your plans are no different. Protect them, nurture them, let them take root in silence. Seneca put it bluntly. Our progress is measured not by what we say, but by what we do. Your discipline, your consistency, the ability to repeat an action until your life is transformed, that is what counts. So here is a shift you can practice. First, stop announcing your goals. Write them down for yourself, not for the world. Let the journal, not the crowd, hear them. Second, replace every promise with an action. If you say you want to read more, open the book now and read a page. Don't wait for Monday or next month. Third, at the end of the day, reflect not on what you intended, but on what you actually did. Ask yourself, what action brought me closer to the life I want today? If the answer is nothing, then you know where to begin tomorrow, because at the core, you don't want to impress anyone. You want to transform, and transformation doesn't start with your lips, it starts with your hands, your feet, and your discipline. This isn't about repression. Talking can be useful, it can help clarify thoughts. But when you notice that you are talking more than you are doing, recognize the trap. You are building an imaginary version of yourself in words that doesn't align with the reality of your life. And that gap between who you claim to be and who you really are, it hurts. It catches up eventually. You don't need to feel that pain anymore. You can choose to conserve your energy for building, not explaining. Let me illustrate with a simple image. Imagine two people. The first announces proudly to everyone that they are writing a book. Months later, the manuscript doesn't exist. The excitement has faded. And now, when people ask, there's only embarrassment. The second person tells no one. They quietly wake up early, write page after page, until a year later they hand you a finished manuscript. No speeches, no announcements, just results. Which person earns your respect? Which person do you want to be? The lesson here is simple but demanding. Words fade, actions remain. The more you talk about your goals, the less likely you are to fulfill them. The more you act in silence, the stronger your transformation becomes. Your life will speak for you in ways louder than any speech ever could. So the next time you feel the urge to announce your change, pause. Ask yourself, am I searching for validation, or am I ready to act? If it's validation, stay quiet. If it's action, move. Because destiny isn't written by what you say, it's written by what you do. Less talk, more destiny. Every word you speak to yourself is like a command written into the operating system of your life. Most people don't realize it, but your inner voice is the rudder that steers your destiny. You might think you're joking when you say things like, I'm always late, or I'm terrible with money, or I never finish what I start. But your brain doesn't laugh. It records. It treats those statements as instructions. And soon, your actions begin to line up with those instructions. Without even realizing it, you become the story you keep repeating. Imagine meeting someone for the first time. Within 10 minutes, they've told you they're bad with money, bad at time management, and bad at relationships. Even if they're smiling, even if they're joking, your brain forms a label. This person is unreliable. That is exactly what happens when you repeat negative labels about yourself. The more you say them, the more the world treats you accordingly, and the more you believe them yourself. It's a vicious cycle, language reinforcing identity, identity reinforcing behavior. The Stoics saw language not as decoration, but as destiny. Seneca said that what you think of yourself is far more important than what others think of you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A man's life is what his thoughts make of it, and those thoughts almost always take the form of words." When your language is defeatist, your life becomes a reflection of that defeat. When your words carry strength, your life begins to echo that strength. Modern psychology has confirmed this with brutal clarity. Kristen Neff, a leading researcher on self-compassion, found that people who speak to themselves with kindness and encouragement bounce back from setbacks faster and have more courage to face challenge. It's not because their circumstances are easier, but because their inner voice doesn't sabotage them. Contrast this with people who constantly use harsh, critical language on themselves. They approach every challenge already defeated, hearing the words "I can't" long before they've even tried. Think of Thomas Edison. He failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb. When asked how he could tolerate so much failure, he never said, "I'm useless." He said, "I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." His language was fuel. It turned failure into feedback. That simple reframing gave him the endurance to keep moving until he succeeded. Now compare that to the person who makes self-deprecating jokes at every dinner table. "I'm the clumsy one. I never choose the right partner. I always mess things up." It might get a laugh, but those jokes are drops of acid falling on self-esteem. Day after day, they wear a groove so deep it becomes a prison. And this is where many of us, especially in our 30s and 40s, feel the pinch. Life gets heavier, responsibilities multiply, failures accumulate, and instead of standing firm, we cover the pain with sarcastic jokes about ourselves. We laugh on the outside, but inside, we are training our minds to see weakness as our permanent identity. We don't notice how powerful these casual words are. They are like invisible uniforms we wear each day, signaling to the world how to treat us. The Stoics refused to accept careless speech. Epictetus told his students to make sure their philosophy was seen more in their actions than in their words. But he also knew that words were the soil from which actions grew. If your inner voice is poisoned, your life will be poisoned too. If your inner voice is disciplined and strong, your life will follow suit. So how do we shift this? First, catch the phrase. Every time you hear yourself say something negative, pause. Notice it. Don't let it pass unchecked. Then reframe it. Instead of saying, "I'm terrible at this," say, "I'm still learning." Instead of, "I always fail," say, "Each attempt moves me forward." These small changes might sound insignificant, but over time they redirect the entire ship of your life. Second, eliminate labels disguised as jokes. You are not the hopeless one or the clumsy one. Every time you repeat those labels, your brain accepts them as truth. Drop them. Third, don't let others hold you hostage to an old version of yourself. If someone says, "You've always been like that," answer, even if only in your head, "That was before. I'm growing now." That single correction tells your brain you're not stuck, you're evolving. Let me give you an image. Picture your mind as a notebook. Every day you write one sentence about yourself in it. If the sentences say, "I'm not enough," "I'll never change," "This is too hard," then your notebook is filled with despair. Read enough of it, and you start to believe it's destiny. But if you begin to fill it with words like, "I am capable," "I am learning," "I am building," over time you create a different book. And the book you read every day becomes the life you live. Language is like a rudder. It's small compared to the ocean of life, but it steers the entire vessel. Every time you say I can't, you turn toward the storm. Every time you say I'm learning, you steer toward the horizon. It's not magic, it's direction. And over months and years, direction determines destination. So let's be practical. Start tomorrow morning by paying attention to the first words you use about yourself. Are they complaints, apologies, or harsh judgments? Or are they words of strength and clarity? Choose carefully, because those words are not just sounds in your head. They are seeds, and whatever seeds you plant, your life will harvest. Your inner voice is not a background soundtrack. It's the author of your future. If you continue speaking poorly about yourself, your world will shrink to match those words. But if you begin to speak to yourself with strength, fairness, and respect, you will start writing a different destiny. And when that happens, you won't need to beg for validation from others. Your very presence will carry the authority of someone who has chosen a new language and therefore a new life. The most dangerous story you ever hear is not the one someone else tells about you. It's the one you whisper to yourself when no one else can hear. That inner narrative, the quiet script running in the background of your life, has more power over your destiny than almost anything else. When you fail, when you wake up exhausted, when you look in the mirror and doubt yourself, that voice speaks. And if that voice repeats day after day that you are not enough, eventually you believe it. Worse, you start acting as if it's true. A single thought doesn't define you, but repetition does. Every time your mind says, "This always happens to me," or "I'm not cut out for this," you reinforce an identity that limits you. It becomes less like a passing opinion and more like a prison sentence. Psychology has studied this in depth. Aaron Beck, the founder of cognitive therapy, showed that much of human suffering comes not from life itself, but from what he called automatic negative thoughts. They aren't objective truths. They're distorted interpretations. But because they show up instantly and repeatedly, we stop questioning them. We accept them as reality. Think of it this way. Your mind is like a notebook, and every day you write a single sentence about yourself. If those sentences always say, "I fail," "I'm broken," "I can't," the notebook becomes filled with defeat. And when you flip through the pages of your life, all you ever read is a story of weakness. It feels like destiny, but it's just repetition. Sometimes the greatest act of discipline isn't saying more, it's silencing those destructive lines before they gain strength. Not everything your mind says deserves to become truth. The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to us, but what we think about what happens to us that hurts us." Seneca added, "A man suffers more in imagination than in reality." Most of the pain we live through isn't caused by the events themselves, but by the judgments we pile on top. The harsh voice inside us becomes heavier than the actual experience. History is full of people who refuse to let their inner narrative stay poisoned. Consider Frida Kahlo. After a devastating accident left her body shattered, she could have told herself endlessly, "I am broken. My life is over." Instead, she crafted a different narrative. She painted. She transformed pain into art, into vibrant colors, into a legacy of resilience. Her inner voice didn't deny her reality, but it gave it a different meaning. And that meaning turned tragedy into immortality. You don't have to be an artist to do the same. Every day you have the choice to edit your internal script. When your mind screams, "I can't handle this," you can answer, "I am learning to handle this." When it repeats, "I always fail," you can say, "Every time I move forward a little more." These aren't empty affirmations. They're corrections. They're ways of giving yourself the fairness you would offer to a friend. Because here's the irony. Most of us speak to others with more compassion than we do to ourselves. We encourage our friends. We reassure our children. we comfort strangers, but inside our own heads we're merciless. We punish instead of protect. That inner cruelty shows up everywhere. At work, you beat yourself up for every mistake until the job feels unbearable. In relationships, you tell yourself you're unlovable before anyone else even has a chance to prove you wrong. In your health, you sabotage every attempt to change by repeating that you failed before and will fail again. These aren't truths. They're stories you've let calcify into beliefs. And beliefs, repeated often enough, dictate destiny. Changing your inner narrative won't happen in a single day. Just like a train can't switch tracks instantly, your mind needs consistent practice to redirect itself. That's why silence is so important. When you catch a toxic phrase rising inside you, don't feed it with more words. Pause, breathe, question whether it deserves to become your truth. That pause creates space, and in that space, you can choose a different line for your notebook. Over weeks and months, those new lines accumulate, and the story begins to change. One day you'll look back and realize you no longer recognize the old character you used to play, the self-punishing, self-sabotaging version of you. You've rewritten the script. Consider how this applies to our modern world. Social media thrives on self-deprecation disguised as humor. Entire meme cultures are built on the idea that you're broken, lazy, unlucky, doomed to fail. People share these jokes to feel connected, but the cost is subtle brainwashing. Every time you laugh and say, "That's me," you are reinforcing a narrative of weakness. And though it feels harmless, over time it writes itself into your identity. The Stoics would tell us to be vigilant, to guard our inner voice as carefully as we guard our bodies, because once corrupted, it shapes everything. Here's a simple practice at the end of each day. Ask yourself, what story did I tell myself today? Was it the story of someone defeated before the fight even began? Or was it the story of someone learning, adapting, moving forward one step at a time? You don't need to lie to yourself. You don't need to say everything is perfect. But you do need to give yourself the same fairness and hope you would give to someone you love. Because if you don't rewrite the narrative, no one else will. Remember this. The life you live is an echo of the words you repeat to yourself. Change the words, and you change the echo. Change the echo, and you change the character you play. Change the character, and you change the entire story. You don't need to declare it to the world. Do it silently, because it's in the intimate conversation you have with yourself, the one no one else hears, where your true destiny is written. Not everyone who smiles at you is a friend, and not every hand extended deserves to hold your story. Trust is one of the most valuable treasures you can give, but it is also one of the most fragile. One careless word, one betrayal, one mocking comment can shatter something that took years to build. Yet many confuse trust with oversharing. They believe opening up to anyone who listens is a sign of authenticity. In reality, it is like leaving the door to your most private world unlocked for strangers to walk through. And then comes the disappointment. Something you shared in confidence becomes gossip at someone else's dinner table. A painful moment you revealed in search of empathy becomes a punchline. Vulnerability, when given to the wrong person, transforms into a weapon used against you. If this sounds familiar, it's because all of us have, at some point, given our trust too quickly, only to feel the sting of regret. Nature itself warns us against this. Think of the oyster. It produces its most beautiful pearl in silence, hidden, protected. That pearl doesn't form in exposure, but in secrecy, with patience and time. And not everyone gets access to it. Only those who truly earn it. That is how your trust should work. Earned slowly, tested carefully, protected deliberately. Perhaps you've experienced it at work. You confide in a colleague, thinking they will respect your struggle. Instead, the story spreads round the office, twisted and exaggerated. Or in friendships, you share something vulnerable, only to have it dismissed with a casual comparison. That's nothing. What I went through was worse. Instead of empathy, you receive ego. The pain of oversharing is not just disappointment, it is self-betrayal. The Stoics knew this well. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you must first be sure someone is worthy of your trust before giving it. Epictetus was even more blunt. It is good to listen to everyone, but not wise to speak intimately with everyone. Not every ear is a safe place. They weren't teaching isolation. They were teaching discernment. Because when trust is given selectively, it strengthens relationships. When it's given recklessly, it becomes a constant risk. History is full of people who learned this lesson the hard way. Nikola Tesla was a genius whose generosity and eagerness to share his ideas left him open to manipulation. Men like Thomas Edison and J.P. Morgan exploited his brilliance while Tesla faded into obscurity. His story reminds us that brilliance without discernment in trust can cost you not only projects but peace and even legacy. So how do we protect ourselves without falling into paranoia? Start by observing, not talking. Pay attention to how someone treats other people's secrets. If they thrive on gossip, what do you think they'll do with yours? Your initial silence is already a filter. Next, test carefully. Share something small and see what happens. If the person respects it, doesn't twist it into a joke, and keeps it private, that's a good sign. If they break it, you've learned something important without risking your deepest truth. And ask yourself before every moment of disclosure, am I sharing this because I truly trust the person, or because I can't bear the weight alone? If it's the second, there are safer ways to release the pressure. Write it in a journal, take a long walk and speak it out loud to yourself. Even pray if that helps you. Not everything needs to be handed over to another human being. This is especially urgent in our social media culture, where oversharing has become entertainment. People broadcast heartbreaks, conflicts, personal wounds for likes and validation. But what happens when those stories become ammunition for criticism or mockery? What happens when the intimacy you posted today becomes the meme someone laughs at tomorrow? The result is not healing but harm. Silence, in this sense, is protection. It preserves your dignity while you heal and grow. Trust should be like bamboo. For years it grows roots underground, invisible to the eye. Only after that foundation is strong does it shoot upward. Your trust, too, needs time to form roots before it can safely bloom. If you hand it over too quickly, it will collapse under the first test. You deserve to be surrounded by people who treat your trust as sacred. And you will find them, but only if you are patient. Protect your pearl, guard it. Because while not everyone deserves your trust, you deserve the peace that comes from knowing your trust is placed wisely. So here's the challenge. The next time you feel the urge to spill everything to someone, pause. Ask yourself if they have earned it through their actions, not just through their presence. If the answer is no, hold back. Write it down. Keep it for yourself. In time, you'll discover that the people who are worthy will reveal themselves not in words but in consistent behavior. And those are the ones who deserve to hold the treasure of your trust. One of the greatest dangers of oversharing is the trap of mistaking applause for progress. It feels so good to be seen, to be praised, to have others notice that you are trying, that you begin to confuse their reaction with real growth. And once that happens, you disconnect from your own path. If you constantly need validation to keep moving, you aren't building discipline. You're building a sandcastle that washes away the moment the tide of attention disappears. We live in an age where everything gets displayed. Every small step, every minor achievement, every habit that barely has roots is quickly packaged into a post. Someone takes a picture of their salad and says they're living healthy. Another records a video of themselves studying and says they're building discipline. But the danger isn't in sharing, it's in depending on the reactions. The moment there are no likes, no claps, no comments, motivation collapses. Your engine dies, and suddenly you realize your consistency was never yours, it belonged to the crowd. Real strength has nothing to do with what the audience sees. It's measured by what you do when no one is watching. That is where character is forged. Not in the post, not in the compliment, not in the brief burst of recognition, but in those quiet hours when you choose to train, to study, to create, or to endure with no one there to applaud you. Think of it like a tree. No one claps when its roots spread silently underground. But without those invisible roots, it could never stand tall. If a tree relied on applause, it would never survive long enough to give shade. History offers brutal examples of this truth. Emily Dickinson, one of the most influential poets in history, lived most of her life in silence. She published only a few poems, often anonymously. She wasn't chasing recognition, she wasn't searching for applause. She wrote privately in her room, pouring herself into her words, unseen by the world. Only after her death did the world discover over 1,700 poems that changed literature forever. Her strength wasn't in being admired, it was in doing the work without needing an audience. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, did the same. He didn't write his meditations as a book for the public. He wrote them as a journal, a private dialogue with himself. He was holding himself accountable, not showing off. Those writings, never meant to be read, became a pillar of Stoic philosophy. His greatness didn't come from broadcasting his discipline, it came from silently practicing it. Epictetus warned against pride in self-discipline. He told his students to let it be enough for themselves, because true discipline doesn't need to be announced. It is valuable even if no one ever knows about it. But here's the danger of premature sharing. When you talk about your goals too early, you give yourself a premature sense of accomplishment. Your brain rewards you with a shot of dopamine as though you've already done the work. You walk away feeling proud, but the hunger that drove you is gone. Maybe this has happened to you. You were excited about a new habit, a big project, or a life change. You told everyone. People praised you, encouraged you, admired you, and the next day, your motivation collapsed. That premature applause stole the fuel that was supposed to carry you through the grind. In our modern world, this trap is everywhere. Social media thrives on early announcements. Fitness influencers post day one pictures before they've done a week of training. Entrepreneurs pitch startups before they build prototypes. Students post about studying before they've even taken the test. It all feels like momentum, but it's an illusion. The applause tricks them into thinking progress has been made when nothing has changed. And then comes the crash. That's why training in silence is so powerful. When you keep your plans to yourself, you protect them. You reinforce them privately. When you celebrate achievements quietly, you make them yours. They stop being performances and become realities. It stings at first not to be seen. It's uncomfortable to do hard things in the dark. But that is the difference between someone addicted to light and someone shaped in the shadows. One seeks recognition, the other seeks transformation. And transformation never depends on applause. Ask yourself honestly, when you post your progress online, are you doing it because you need the work, or because you need people to see the work? That question alone can save you from walking down a path of noise and emptiness. Because most of the transformations that matter in your life will happen without an audience. They will happen in silence, in discipline, in nights of effort no one knows about. And that is not just okay, it is necessary. Real value doesn't always announce itself. It grows, it deepens, it strengthens quietly until the results can no longer be denied. Think of Florence Nightingale. who worked in terrible hospital conditions during the Crimean War, while others debated and argued about reforms. She quietly cleaned wards, organized care, and gathered evidence. When her work finally came to light, it wasn't theory, it was undeniable results. Her legacy was born not in speeches, but in the silent trenches of real effort. In psychology, researchers call this the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. If your motivation depends on claps, you're extrinsically motivated. The moment the claps stop, so do you. But if your motivation is rooted inside, in your own commitment and values, no lack of applause can stop you. That is intrinsic motivation, and it is what produces resilience. The Stoics would call it living in accordance with your own principles, not with the fleeting opinions of others. So make silence your training ground. The next time you feel the urge to announce your plans, resist. Instead, take the smallest possible step toward your goal and keep it private. Feel how much more powerful that quiet victory is compared to the shallow dopamine of likes. Build your life in such a way that even if no one ever sees, you know you are solid. Because when you no longer need validation, you finally know your discipline is real. Remember this, applause is cheap, but discipline is priceless. Progress is not a performance, it is a private contract between you and your destiny. Real strength is what you do without an audience, what you practice in silence, what you persist with when the world isn't looking. So let go of the obsession with being seen. Create in silence, grow in silence. Let your life prove itself through resilience, not recognition. And when the time comes to reveal what you've built, it will no longer need applause. The results will speak louder than any crowd. Think for a moment about how much you talk in a day. Now ask yourself, how much of that time is spent truly listening? Not just hearing words while your mind prepares its response. Not nodding politely while waiting for your turn, but genuinely being present, absorbing what the other person is saying without judgment. We live in a time where everyone wants to speak, to shout, to share their opinions. Platforms reward volume, not depth. Everyone is broadcasting, and yet fewer and fewer are listening. The irony is that listening, though it looks passive, is one of the most powerful disciplines you can develop. The one who listens sees what others miss. They pick up subtle tones in the voice. They notice hesitation behind words. They understand what is left unsaid. They sense intention. They catch nuance, and they learn what others rush past. But because listening doesn't create instant recognition, few people bother to practice it. The Stoics, however, valued it deeply. Seneca warned that the one who knows how to speak must also know how to stay silent. Epictetus, born into slavery, turned the silence forced upon him into wisdom. He learned that holding back words gave him control over himself. He later taught his students to pause before speaking, to resist the urge to throw words round carelessly. Silence, for him, was not emptiness, but strategy. Think about conversations you've had with people who never let you finish a sentence. Before you're done, they cut in with, "I already know where this is going," or, "That's nothing. Let me tell you about my experience." You leave feeling like you spoke to a wall, drained rather than understood. It wasn't a dialogue, it was a monologue in disguise. Now imagine the opposite. Someone who lets you finish, who doesn't interrupt, who asks thoughtful questions instead of rushing to share their opinion. How do you feel afterward? Heard, respected, understood. That feeling lingers because it is rare. And because it is rare, it carries enormous power. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, could have been the loudest voice in the empire. Instead, he spent much of his time listening to philosophers, to soldiers, to ordinary citizens. He didn't always need to dominate the conversation. In Meditations, what we find are not grand speeches, but quiet reflections, questions he asked himself after listening. That humility to listen, even when he had the authority to speak, made him wiser than many rulers who came before and after him. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics practiced. Carl Rogers, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, built his entire therapeutic method on active listening. He discovered that when someone feels truly heard without judgment, they flourish. Their defenses drop. Their growth begins. Listening, far from passive, is transformative. And this is not limited to therapy. In friendships, in leadership, in family life, the act of listening creates bonds that words alone cannot. Across cultures, the art of silence in listening has long been honored. In Japan, there is a concept called harage, which means belly communication. It's not about words, but about sensing emotions, intentions, and truths beyond what is spoken. In Japanese business culture, silence often communicates more than words. What isn't said can be more significant than what is. Imagine bringing that sensitivity into your own life, listening not just for facts, but for the deeper layers of human communication. Yet in our world of constant noise, this discipline is harder than ever. Notifications pull at your attention. Debates on social media reward the fastest response, not the most thoughtful. We are conditioned to react, to defend, to respond quickly. But the one who listens patiently, who pauses before speaking, develops an advantage. Their words, when finally spoken, carry more weight because they come from understanding, not reflex. Listening is also an act of humility. It acknowledges that you don't know everything, that even someone younger, less experienced, or less educated might carry a truth you need to hear. The moment you stop assuming you have all the answers, you open yourself to learning from unexpected places. A single sentence, spoken by the right person at the right time, can shift the course of your life, but only if you are quiet enough to let it indulge. So how can you practice this art? Start small. In your next conversation, resist the urge to interrupt. When someone is speaking, notice how quickly your mind starts preparing a reply. Catch that impulse, pause, let them finish. Then ask a question instead of making a statement. You'll notice how differently the conversation flows, and how much more respect you earn without saying much at all. Also remember that not every comment deserves a response. Some words are provocations designed to drag you into useless arguments. In those moments, silence is not weakness, it is wisdom. Musonius Rufus, teacher of Epictetus, said that the one who remains silent in the face of nonsense shows more wisdom than the one who fights it with noise. Your silence in these moments protects your energy. While your opponent wastes theirs in shouting, the truth is, listening doesn't make you invisible. It makes you powerful. It gives you knowledge, patience, and clarity. And when you do finally speak, people listen, because your words are rare and thoughtful, not rushed and careless. You become the person others trust, not because you always talk, but because when you speak, it matters. So train yourself. 2 ears, 1 mouth. That ratio is no accident. It is nature's reminder to listen more than you speak. The hidden power of listening is not that it silences you, but that it strengthens you. Because the real strength in conversation doesn't belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to the one who understands best. We live surrounded by noise, so much of it that many people mistake it for life itself. There is the external kind, non-stop notifications, meaningless chatter, interruptions that steal your focus, and the internal kind, endless comparisons. Doubts that repeat like a broken record, the compulsion to explain every move so others will approve. After a while, that noise becomes exhausting. It drains you, it scatters your energy, and it leaves you stuck in the illusion of progress when all you're really doing is spinning in circles. Think about how often this happens. You wake up with the intention to improve your health, to end a toxic relationship, to regain focus on something important. And before taking a single step, you've already told someone about it. You share it out loud, maybe post it online, as if the process isn't real until there is an audience to validate it. That's the trap. When you need witnesses for your progress, you are no longer the lead actor in your life, you're a performer in a play written for others. And the more you perform, the less you transform. The Stoics saw through this long before Instagram or TikTok existed. Marcus Aurelius said, "He who talks constantly about what he will do shows that he is not yet ready to do it." Behind every long explanation there is usually insecurity. The one who is at peace does not feel the urge to justify each step. The one who is focused does not need applause to move forward. Seneca warned that life is too short to waste on useless speeches. His words ring louder today than ever, in a world where visibility is mistaken for existence. If you didn't post it, people say it didn't happen. If no one validates it, it must not be real. But that is a lie. Your process doesn't need spectators. It needs discipline. There are countless examples of this truth. Amadeo Modigliani, the Italian painter, spent his life in poverty, ignored by the art world. He wasn't busy attending salons, bragging about his talent, or chasing validation at every corner. He painted in silence, obsessed with his art, while the noise of the world passed him by. Only after his death did his work gain recognition, and now his paintings are celebrated across the world. His life is a brutal reminder that real value doesn't need noise. It matures in silence until it is undeniable that the same is true for you. Every time you over-explain yourself, every time you narrate each decision as if it needs approval, you weaken your focus. Imagine sitting in a cafe with friends while someone talks endlessly about their big plans, the business they launch, the book they'll write, the radical change they're about to make. They talk with so much energy it almost feels real, and yet months later nothing has changed. All that noise was a substitute for action. We've all met people like this, and if we're honest, many of us have been that person at some point. Noise wears many disguises. Sometimes it looks like conversations, sometimes like social media posts, sometimes like long explanations to people who didn't even ask. But beneath it all is the same thing: fear of silence. Because silence forces you to face reality without decoration. Silence reveals whether you are acting or only talking. And that can be uncomfortable, but silence is also where clarity is born. When you lower the noise, you realize what truly matters. You discover that not every thought deserves to be shared. Not every opinion deserves your energy. Not every step requires justification. Protect your focus the way a gardener protects a fragile seedling. A seed needs shelter before it can grow into a tree. In the same way, your changes need protection before they can survive criticism, doubt, or comparison. This doesn't mean isolation. It doesn't mean shutting everyone out. It means choosing which voices you let in, choosing which conversations deserve your energy, choosing what to keep to yourself while it's still taking shape. The more you choose, the more your mind becomes quiet, and the more power you gain. Think of your life as a soundboard. Right now, too many channels are turned up opinions from coworkers, endless scrolling on social media, the inner critic repeating old fears. It's all noise. Learning to silence it is like slowly sliding down the volume knobs. One by one, the chaos fades until the melody of your own discipline becomes clear. That melody doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need noise to exist. It needs consistency. So how do you practice silencing the noise? Start by noticing when you talk just to calm yourself down. Ask, am I sharing this because I trust the listener, or because silence makes me uncomfortable? If it's the second, pause. Keep it to yourself. Then, curate your environment. Turn off notifications that interrupt your focus. Create quiet spaces in your day to think, to act, to breathe, and most importantly, resist the need to justify yourself. Not everyone deserves an explanation. Sometimes the strongest act of discipline is moving forward quietly. At first, silence feels strange. You've been conditioned to narrate everything, to prove you're making progress by telling the world. But once you experience silence, you discover peace. The peace of not needing applause. The peace of clarity that doesn't depend on validation. The peace of realizing that what matters doesn't need noise to be real. Noise is heavy. It scatters your attention, steals your energy, and delays your transformation. Silence, on the other hand, is light. It strengthens your focus, protects your growth, and accelerates change. So ask yourself today, what noise do you need to silence? Which distractions, which explanations, which unnecessary voices? Every time you lower the volume of the noise, you raise the volume of your discipline. Because yes, noise is tiring, but silence is power. And the one who learns to silence the noise learns to reclaim their life. Not everything in your life deserves to escape through your lips. Some of your most important battles are meant to be fought in silence. Not because you are weak, not because you are hiding, but because you understand that what is most valuable must be protected. Some decisions lose their strength the moment they're exposed. Some processes collapse when interrupted by the doubts or fears of others. You've likely experienced this. You made a choice to change jobs, to leave a relationship, to take your health seriously. In that moment you felt clear, certain, strong. But then you told someone, and instead of encouragement, you received hesitation. They asked, "Are you sure? Isn't that too risky?" If I were you, I'd think twice. Suddenly the clarity you felt begins to blur. The certainty you had begins to falter. Their fears become your fears. Fear is contagious. And when you expose your fragile beginnings too early, you allow other people's fear to infect your resolve. Nature teaches us differently. Watch the tiger before it hunts. It hides in the tall grass, silent, unseen. If it roared too early, its prey would vanish. Its strategy is silence. Only when the time is right does it move. That's how your decisions should be treated, protected until they are ready. Revealed only through action. I've lived this mistake myself. There was a time when I knew I needed radical change. I didn't have every detail figured out, but I felt that in a compass, that certainty that doesn't lie. But instead of acting, I spoke too soon. I shared it, looking for support, maybe a little validation. What I received were borrowed fears. What if it doesn't work? What if you regret it? What if you can't handle it? Those doubts soaked into me, and I delayed what I had already decided. Looking back, I learned something priceless. Some decisions are not meant to be discussed. They are meant to be executed. The Stoics knew this intimately. Marcus Aurelius, who carried the weight of an empire, didn't make public speeches about his doubts or his discipline. He wrote privately in his meditations. His strength was in acting according to his principles, not in convincing others. He once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." Strength, in other words, isn't in persuading others, it's in guarding the integrity of your own mind. Seneca said it even more sharply. What a wise man holds inside, no rumor can touch. That's the essence of keeping secrets strategically, not hiding out of fear, but protecting what's still forming so it can grow without interference. This isn't just ancient wisdom. Look at modern examples. Beyoncé once worked for months in absolute secrecy on an entire album, complete with music videos. No leaks, no hints, no teasing. One night she simply released it, and it changed the music industry. Her silence was her shield. By keeping her project hidden, she protected it from critics expectations and distractions. And when it was finally revealed, it was undeniable. That is the power of silence combined with action. Too often, people confuse silence with repression. They think if you don't talk about everything, you're bottling it up. But there's a difference between repression and protection. Repression is burying pain so you never deal with it. Protection is giving your process the privacy it needs to grow. Not every seed should be dug up and shown to the world before it has roots. If you reveal too early, it withers. Prudence means knowing what to share, when to share, and with whom. Social media has made this harder than ever. People feel pressured to announce every move: new goals, new diets, new relationships, new projects. But many of these announcements weaken the very thing they were meant to strengthen. They invite doubt, criticism, envy, all pressure that destabilizes fragile beginnings. Your decision to change doesn't need a digital audience. It needs your discipline. Your battle to heal doesn't need spectators. It needs your quiet perseverance. Of course, there is a place for a trusted confidence. Sharing with someone who has proven to be respectful and discreet can be powerful. But sharing with everyone is exposure, not intimacy. The difference is prudence. Prudence is not hesitation, it is wisdom. It ensures that your path is guided by your own clarity, not clouded by the voices of others. So ask yourself, the next time you feel the urge to announce something big, why am I sharing this? Is it because I truly trust this person? Or is it because I feel uncomfortable carrying it a little longer on my own? If it's the second, stay silent. Let that silence be a wall that protects your clarity. Over time, you will discover that you don't need explanations. Your actions, your changes, your energy will speak for you. The most important battles in your life won't be fought on a stage. They will be fought in your mind, in your daily discipline, in the quiet consistency no one applauds. And when the results finally show, you won't need to tell anyone what you were doing all along. It will be obvious. So protect your secrets, not out of fear, but out of respect for the process. Keep them hidden until they are strong enough to survive on their own. And remember, the strength of what you keep secret is not in the silence itself, it is in the transformation that grows within it. Untouched by the noise of the world, we live in a culture where it feels like everything must be displayed to count. If you don't share it on social media, it's as if it never happened. If you don't post a photo of your workout, your progress doesn't seem real. If you don't announce a new habit, you doubt whether you're actually committed to it. But real transformation doesn't need witnesses. The strongest growth always happens in silence, far from applause, far from validation, far from the hungry eyes of others. The danger of oversharing is that you turn your process into a performance. You talk about the changes you're making. You wrap them in polished language. You broadcast them before they're ready. But when you do this, you shift your energy away from building and toward performing. The change stops being about living and starts being about proving. And what could have been deep transformation gets stuck at the level of presentation. Picture this. You start waking up earlier, eating better, caring for your mind. But instead of announcing it, you keep it quiet. You go about your days, stacking small victories. Months later, someone you haven't seen in a while says, "You seem different." What changed? That one comment carries more weight than 100 likes. Because it wasn't forced. It wasn't asked for. It was noticed. Your life spoke for itself. That is the kind of recognition that matters. The kind that comes uninvited because it is undeniable. Seneca understood this when he wrote that happiness is born from our own soul and doesn't depend on the opinion of others. Real growth is not a performance. It doesn't need a spotlight. It doesn't need an audience. It needs consistency, patience, and courage to continue when no one is watching. Marcus Aurelius modeled this truth. He recorded his progress and mistakes in private notes, not for public approval, but to keep himself accountable. His greatness wasn't in convincing the world, it was in mastering himself when no one was looking. Think of Rosa Parks. She didn't announce that she would make history. She didn't tell the world, "Watch me." One afternoon, weary of injustice, she simply chose not to give up her seat on the bus. That quiet act, born of inner conviction, shook an entire nation. She didn't need speeches or posts. Her silent courage spoke louder than any broadcast ever could. There is a subtle but important distinction here. Silence does not mean your growth is less valuable. In fact, silence amplifies it. It shields your fragile beginnings from comparison, doubt, and outside pressure. Think of a sprout pushing through soil. If you keep pulling it out to show everyone, it will never survive. But if you leave it in the dark, unseen, it grows stronger, until one day it breaks through with undeniable presence. The modern obsession with visibility is dangerous. People post about every gym session, every study session, every meditation session, not realizing that the very act of posting shifts their motivation. Instead of doing it for themselves, they begin doing it for the applause. And when the applause fades, so does the habit. That is why so many resolutions die after a few weeks. They were built on the shaky ground of recognition, not on the solid ground of personal conviction. So how do you protect your growth? First, resist the urge to narrate every step. Allow some of your progress to remain invisible. Second, focus on the private satisfaction of quiet victories. Celebrate the fact that you woke up earlier, even if no one knows. Feel the reward of choosing discipline over distraction, even if no one sees. Third, recognize that real growth is not about being noticed. It's about becoming. Growth is not weakened by silence, it is strengthened by it. Silence forces you to depend on discipline, not applause. Silence protects your energy from being drained by endless explanations. Silence makes your growth yours, not a performance for others. And when the time comes, when your life begins to radiate change, it will be so obvious that you won't need to say a word. Imagine how different your life would feel if you stopped chasing validation and started building in quiet. You would no longer feel the anxiety of keeping up appearances. You would no longer waste energy defending your choices to people who don't matter. You would no longer dilute your discipline by sharing it before it's real. Instead, you would move forward with calm certainty, knowing that the only audience that matters is you. And here's the paradox: the less you talk, the more people notice. The less you try to be seen, the more your results shine. Because results have a gravity that words never can. They pull attention without asking for it. They command respect without speeches. They are undeniable. So let your growth be like the roots of a tree. Invisible at first, quiet, unnoticed, but deep, strong, and enduring. And when the time comes, your life will stand tall, providing shade and strength that no words could ever create. The strongest growth is always the growth that doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't ask for applause. It simply becomes. Words are not just sounds that vanish into the air. They are seeds that shape the direction of your life, either opening doors or quietly locking them shut. The Stoics knew this, and modern psychology confirms it. Yet most of us treat words as casual decorations, something to fill silence, something to entertain. We don't realize that every careless phrase is planting something that will grow either weeds that choke our progress or roots that anchor our strength. I once heard a story of a Zen master who asked his students to repeat two phrases every day for a month. One group repeated, "I am weak, I can't change anything." The other repeated, "I have strength within me to move forward." Nothing else changed in their lives. No external difference at all. But after several weeks, the first group felt drained. hopeless, lacking initiative, while the second group felt energized, confident, ready to act. The only thing that had changed was their words. That's the invisible power of language. Your words don't disappear. They stay inside you, shaping how you see yourself, how others see you, and ultimately how you act. Every time you say, "I'm a mess," or "I'll probably fail," you carve that identity deeper. At first it feels harmless, maybe even funny, but over time it wears down your confidence the way water wears down stone. Drop by drop, the surface of your life erodes, and what's left is a version of yourself that matches the story you've been telling. The Stoics were ruthless about this. Seneca said the language of truth must be simple and free of ornament. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to speak justly. Not too much, not too little. Words weren't just expressions, they were acts of integrity. They demanded discipline, and if your words weren't aligned with your actions, they were dangerous. Think about your own life. How many times have you casually joked about yourself in ways that belittle you? At dinner with friends, you laugh and say, "I'm hopeless at relationships," or "I'm useless at practical things." People laugh. You shrug it off. But inside, your mind records it. Over weeks and months, that repetition cements into identity. You begin to act accordingly, not because it's true, but because your words made it feel true. On the other side, think of the time someone said exactly what you needed to hear. A single sentence, "You can handle this," or "You're stronger than you think," can lift you in moments when you thought you had nothing left. Words can be knives, or they can be medicine, and you choose which they become every time you open your mouth. Maya Angelou, poet and activist, once said that people will forget what you said. They'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. That's the enduring power of words. They leave a mark not only on you, but on everyone around you. Careless words leave scars. Careful words build trust and hope. In today's world, where sarcasm and cynicism dominate, this discipline is more important than ever. Online, people use harsh language like weapons. In workplaces, negativity spreads like wildfire through casual complaints and gossip. In families, words spoken in anger shape children's identities for years. We underestimate the cost of a sharp tongue. The Stoics would call it negligence, a failure to guard what is sacred. Because to them, words were sacred. They were expressions of reason, the very thing that made humans distinct. To waste them or abuse them was to corrupt your humanity. So how can you reclaim the power of words? Begin by observing. Listen to yourself throughout the day. Catch the phrases you repeat without thinking. Are they affirmations of weakness or reminders of strength? Next, practice subtle shifts. Instead of saying, "This is impossible," say, "This is hard, but I'm learning." Instead of, "I failed," say, "I made a mistake, and I can adjust." The difference might feel small, but it reshapes your emotions and your actions. Language creates direction, direction creates destiny. Also, learn when to remain silent. Not everything you think needs to be spoken. If your words don't help, don't clarify, don't build, maybe it's better to hold them. Musonius Rufus, teacher of Epictetus, reminded his students that more than once, silence has saved the one who practiced it. Words carry weight, and sometimes the most disciplined act is choosing not to release them at all. But don't confuse silence with fear. There are moments when speaking truth is necessary, even when it is uncomfortable. The discipline is not about silencing yourself completely, but about choosing carefully. Choose words that reflect integrity, that show respect for yourself and others, that carry strength instead of poison. That way, when you do speak, your voice carries authority because it is rare, deliberate, and aligned. So let me ask you, What words will you start using with more intention from today onward? Which careless phrases will you stop repeating? Your life is already being shaped by your words. You can't escape that fact, but you can decide what kind of life they shape. Speak to yourself with respect. Speak to others with clarity. And when in doubt, let silence hold the place where careless speech once lived. Because every word is a seed. Plant carelessly and you'll harvest weeds. Plant intentionally and you will harvest strength. The Stoics understood this. Modern psychology proves it. And your own experience has shown it again and again. Words either open your destiny or close it. They either build a path forward or wall you in. The choice is always yours. You've probably been there. You open up about something that hurts, and the other person brushes it off. You share your excitement about a project, and they respond with skepticism. You try to explain an internal change, and they meet you with sarcasm or a dismissive smile. It feels like trying to catch the wind with your hands no matter how much effort you pour into explaining. Nothing lands. And the more you try, the more frustrated and small you feel. Here is the truth most people never accept. Not everyone is ready or even capable of understanding you. Imagine pounding on a locked door. You can throw all your strength at it, but unless the person on the other side chooses to open it, nothing will change. Understanding is not in your control. It rests in theirs, and if they are unwilling, no amount of explanation will make a difference. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What we hear is an opinion, not a fact. What we see is a perspective, not the truth. Everyone interprets life through their own lens. To force your truth into theirs is not only futile, it's self-betrayal. You end up shrinking yourself, watering down your voice, dimming your intensity to fit the size of their understanding. In the process, you betray the very growth you were trying to share." Seneca warned about this kind of slavery, the slavery of needing approval. He said, "He is a slave to many who needs the approval of many." Every time you over-explain yourself, you hand over your freedom. You're no longer speaking to grow. You're speaking to please. And pleasing others at the cost of yourself is to higher price. History gives us painful reminders of this truth. Vincent van Gogh painted with passion and vision. Yet during his lifetime, he was misunderstood, criticized, even mocked. No one around him saw what he was trying to express. He could have abandoned his art to fit the opinions of others. He could have spent his life justifying himself, watering down his vision to make it acceptable. Instead, he kept painting. He let the work speak for him. He didn't collapse under the weight of misunderstanding. And though he died without recognition, his art went on to transform the world. His life shows us that the value of what is inside you is not diminished by whether others see it right now. Think of your own life. How many times have you explained a dream only to have someone dismiss it? How many times have you shared a change of heart only to have it ridiculed? Each time, you walked away not only discouraged but weakened, as if their disbelief made your growth less real. But it didn't. Their disbelief was theirs. Your growth was still yours. The mistake was in giving them the power to validate it. Your internal process is like a freshly planted seed. If you dig it up every day to show someone, it dies. Seeds need silence, darkness, and time underground. Your growth is the same. If you expose it to people who lack the willingness or sensitivity to understand, you invite doubt and criticism that stunts before it matures. So what is the alternative? Discernment. Choose carefully who you share your inner world with. If you sense someone lacks respect, don't force them to see you. Your silence in that moment is not weakness. It is protection. It is self-respect. You are not obligated to explain every step of your journey. You don't need to justify every change. Growth does not require witnesses. It requires consistency. This doesn't mean isolation. It means wisdom. There will be people who prove themselves worthy of trust, who show by their actions that they can handle your vulnerability with care. Share with them, but stop wasting energy trying to drag everyone else along. Some people simply aren't ready. Others will never be ready. And that's okay, because your path is not theirs to validate. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be willing to be seen as foolish or ignorant. That's the cost of growth, allowing others to misjudge you while you continue anyway. They may think you're naive. They may think you're unrealistic. They may laugh. But none of that has to touch you if you understand that their perspective is not your truth. Your job is not to persuade them. Your job is to keep building. There is an enormous freedom that comes when you stop needing everyone to understand. You stop wasting energy justifying yourself. You stop reshaping your life to fit someone else's narrative. You begin to walk lighter, freer, more focused. And ironically, when you finally stop trying to be understood, that's when people begin to notice your strength. They see results, not explanations. They see transformation, not announcements. And results speak louder than any speech ever could. So the next time you feel the urge to explain your growth, pause. Ask yourself, am I sharing this because I trust this person, or because I crave validation? If it's trust, share wisely. If it's validation, stay silent. Protect your energy, because not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Not everyone deserves the privilege of understanding you. Your destiny is not written in their opinions. It is written in your actions. And when the time is right, your life will show the truth of your growth without you needing to say a word. You've probably felt it before. You tell someone about a big idea, a new habit, or a project that excites you, and as the words leave your mouth, you feel a rush of satisfaction, almost as if you've already achieved it. For a brief moment, you taste the reward, but then something strange happens. The energy to act fades. Days pass, and you realize you haven't moved forward at all. The more you talk about what you will do, the less likely you are to actually do it. Modern psychology has an explanation for this. Studies show that when you announce your goals, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical that rewards achievement. Your mind registers talking as progress, and you relax, as though the work is already done. It feels good, but it's a trap. Instead of fueling you to climb the mountain, you run back to the village to boast about your progress. People cheer. You feel accomplished, and when you return to the mountain, you have less strength. Do this enough times, and you'll never reach the summit. George Orwell once warned that the greatest enemy of action is talk. The Stoics knew this thousands of years earlier. Seneca advised, "Speak as you teach, but live as you speak." Words mean nothing without deeds behind them. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the Roman Empire, didn't proclaim, "I will be a good emperor." He tried, in silence, to be one. His writings and meditations were not speeches to impress others, but private notes to keep himself disciplined. He needed action, not applause. History offers powerful reminders of this truth. Florence Nightingale, the woman who transformed modern nursing, had every opportunity to broadcast her plans. She came from a wealthy family, moved in elite social circles, and carried the kind of mission that could have been announced loudly. But instead of speeches, she chose silence. During the Crimean War, while others argued about reforms, she was in the trenches organizing care, collecting data, cleaning wards. She worked quietly, relentlessly, without the need for validation. And when her work finally came to light, it was undeniable. Her silence gave her results a weight no speech could match. Think about your own life. How many times have you announced a change only to find yourself stalled weeks later? How many times have you promised publicly to break a habit, save money, or start a project, and then slipped back into old patterns? It's not just laziness, it's the psychology of premature satisfaction. Talking gave you the reward before you earned it. The only way forward is to break the cycle. The solution is simple but demanding. Do more, talk less. Instead of announcing your goals, write them down proudly. Instead of telling people you are changing, start with one action today. Replace speeches with steps. Keep a journal to record progress, not a stage to perform it. By protecting your energy from being scattered through explanations, you channel it into building. And when you build in silence, your strength multiplies. But this isn't about repressing yourself. Talking has its place. It can clarify ideas. It can release tension. It can inspire others when the time is right. The danger comes when talking replaces doing. When your identity is built on declarations rather than actions. That gap between who you claim to be and who you actually are, it hurts. And sooner or later, it catches up with you. In today's world, the temptation to talk is everywhere. Social media encourages constant updates, public accountability, and endless declarations of intention. People tweet about diets before they've skipped a single dessert, vlog about productivity hacks before they've built discipline, post business ideas before they've taken a single step to create them. All of it feels like momentum, but it's empty. It's movement in place, a treadmill disguised as progress. And the algorithm rewards it, making it even harder to resist. But imagine choosing differently. Imagine waking up tomorrow, making a quiet decision, and acting on it without telling anyone. Imagine building a habit in the dark for weeks, even months, until one day someone notices and says, "You've changed." That moment, unforced, carries more power than 100 announcements. Because it wasn't talk, it was transformation. There is freedom in this way of living. You no longer depend on validation to feel real. You no longer waste energy explaining your every step. You no longer dilute your discipline with speeches. Instead, you move forward silently, steadily, until your results speak louder than you ever could. And when they do, you won't need to convince anyone. It will be obvious. So the next time you feel the urge to announce, pause. Ask yourself, am I looking for recognition, or am I ready to build? If it's recognition, stay quiet. Protect your energy. If it's building, act now. Even the smallest step in silence is stronger than the loudest promise shouted to the world. Life doesn't change because you declare it. Life changes because you act. Because you choose, day after day, to reinforce your decisions with deeds instead of words. Because you let silence sharpen your focus until your reality speaks for you. That is what the Stoics practiced. That is what modern psychology affirms. And that is what your own experience already knows to be true. If you've listened this far, it means something inside you is already calling for change. Let that call move you into action, not announcements. Do it quietly. Do it consistently. Do it until your life itself becomes the loudest proof. Because what you do in silence will always weigh more than what you say in noise. If you've stayed with me through these lessons, you already know the pattern. Words fade. Noise fades. Applause fades, but actions remain. All along, we've been circling round one central truth. Your destiny is not written by what you say. It is written by what you do. And the quiet discipline of doing, of protecting your energy, of guarding your trust, of writing your inner voice, is what ultimately reshapes the course of your life. Think about everything we've uncovered. You learned that less talk means more destiny, that every unnecessary declaration drains energy from the act itself. You discovered how your inner voice is a rudder, steering you towards strength or failure depending on the words you choose. You saw how the stories you whisper to yourself matter more than the stories you share with the world, and how rewriting those narratives can transform your identity. You learned that not everyone deserves your trust, and that your strength is measured not by what you display, but by what you do without an audience. You learned that listening is power, That silencing noise gives you peace, and that keeping some battles secret protects them from interference. You learned that the strongest growth is the kind no one sees, and that words themselves can either open your destiny or close it. You learned that not everyone will understand you, and that's okay, because you don't need their validation. And finally, you learned that what you do in silence will always outweigh what you say in noise. This is the thread that ties it all together. Silence, practiced with intention, is not emptiness. It is power. It is the ground where discipline grows. It is the shield that protects clarity. It is the space where transformation matures before it faces the world. Without silence, every seed of growth is exposed to soon and withers. With silence, it gains roots deep enough to endure. We live in a world that constantly pushes you to speak, to share, to prove. Platforms reward noise, friends expect explanations, society celebrates the loudest voice. But you've seen the cost of living that way. You've felt the exhaustion of over-explaining, the disappointment of misplaced trust, the sting of applause that quickly fades, leaving you emptier than before. That cycle doesn't lead to strength, it leads to burnout. And that's why the discipline of silence matters now more than ever. Imagine a life where you no longer need validation to feel real, where you move forward quietly, consistently, letting your life prove itself. Imagine building trust selectively, protecting your process from unnecessary noise, guarding your energy from careless words. Imagine rewriting the story in your head until your inner voice becomes your greatest ally instead of your greatest critic. That is the life Stoicism points toward. Not a life of withdrawal, but a life of alignment. Not a life of empty quiet, but a life of purposeful silence. And here's the paradox. The less you try to prove yourself, the more undeniable your growth becomes. The less you announce, the more powerful your results feel. The less you need applause, the freer you are to build something lasting. Because the truth is, the world doesn't need more words, it needs more people who live what they believe. More people whose lives speak louder than speeches, louder than declarations, louder than noise. So let me leave you with this challenge. Stop narrating your struggles. Stop promising your future. Stop explaining your every move. Start living quietly. Start acting consistently. Start protecting your growth until it is strong enough to stand on its own. Let your silence build your strength, and let your strength rewrite your destiny. If these lessons resonated with you, then you're already part of this journey. And I want you to take one simple step right now. In the comments, write this phrase, Stoic at heart. From today on, I stop talking about my change and start proving it. That will be your first public declaration aligned with action, a small but powerful marker of your commitment to yourself. And if you want more, join our community here at StoicCraft. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and keep walking with us as we explore the wisdom of the Stoics and apply it to the challenges of our modern lives, relationships, work, mental resilience, the constant pool of noise. Every week we go deeper, not into empty theory, but into practical ways to live with more clarity, more courage, and more strength. Your life doesn't have to be a performance. It doesn't have to be explained. It doesn't have to be validated. It has to be lived, and the moment you choose to live it in silence, with discipline and consistency, is the moment your destiny begins to change. Let today be that moment. Close the chapter of noise, begin the chapter of action, and watch as your life speaks louder than words ever could. So take the step now. Subscribe, comment, and most importantly, live it. Because your destiny won't change because you talk about it, it will change because you dare to act.